Ryan, Germain, welcome to the next episode of the podcast series. Really glad we could have this chat today. Thank you for rescheduling a couple of times. So really glad we could sit and have this. But listen, always a good launching pad is to for you to give a brief introduction to yourself, your background, how you've got here today, and having a quick look at your bio. We could probably have a whole podcast on your life adventures till this point. But yeah, do you want to give the listeners a bit of an intro, please?
Yeah, all right. Yeah, great, Jesse. Thank you so much for having me. This is it's always a great opportunity to be able to reach out with ideas, into the world, ideas that possibly can help people. So yeah, I have really two aspects to my career. So one is studying psychology, and I've been fascinated with adventure sports and what it gives us in terms of human development. And the other part is I jump out of airplanes, not casually. Yeah.
There's something strapped to your back, I'm assuming, at the same time. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. Yeah, with parachutes that are extremely high tech and well thought out. It's really not an insane risk. But I've done it thousands and thousands of times. I'm April. I begin my 36th year of
Wow.
jumping out of planes. I don't have an exact count, but the estimation is about 16,000 jumps.
Incredible.
I design and build parachutes. I also have done a lot of competition on the highest level, the X Games and that sort of thing, U.S. Nationals. And it's really helped me to kind of refine my model, to apply what I've learned about psych, apply what I've learned about human physiology and training, uh,
Hmm.
and apply obviously what I know about the actual event, about skydiving. There's a lot of detail. You'd think it's just you just jump out the door, but it's not that simple.
No, geez, I can imagine. And again, for me and maybe a few of my listeners, this is going to be completely new territory. And we might touch on little bits of skydiving, but I'm obviously going to drill into the psychology side because
Of course.
that is where I think, we both get a lot of energy and our juices can flow pretty quickly from there.
Mhm.
So I'm interested to know about I suppose the dovetailing effect of the psychology and your skydiving. How,
Yeah.
was there one that led to the other? Did they dovetail at the same time? So how did those connect?
Well, I mean, for me, the psychology stuff was first, because I mean, the way I see it, as I look back, I was a scared kid. I was, kind of a regular kid. I just had a fear of heights, like most people do. But it held me back when I was younger,
Hmm.
and it just I would avoid, I'd avoid circumstances that provoked that. And when I was 14, I worked on a schooner, a large sailing ship, 118-foot long, beautiful steel hull double mast ship. And when you're low on the totem pole, you got to climb up in the rigging a lot,
Hmm.
at high seas. You're up in,
Wow.
climbing up the ratlins, out the yard arm, out, dropping sails on the squaresails. And it was terrifying. And I was to the point where I was almost frozen. And so
Okay.
I started looking at what I could do just in that moment, even as a 14-year-old kid. What can I do to soothe my fears and maximize my abilities? Because what keeps me safe is my skills, my power. And I
Mhm.
noticed that my fear was robbing me of physical power. I would become weaker, I'd become slower, I'd become less creative, less problem oriented, or solution oriented, more problem oriented. And
Mhm.
that started my curiosity. My mom was a psych major, and we talked about this stuff a lot. She did her master's in that stuff too. So I became very interested in researching that and meditation and its
Mhm.
effects on performance and our ability to select our thoughts,
Nice.
and
Nice.
let go of the thoughts that aren't helpful.
Mhm.
And so when I started skydiving, it all applied very, very well. And I was like, wow, this is a rich format, man. This is an
Yes.
opportunity to apply what I've theorized are the most powerful techniques. And
That's a yeah, well, cool little link story there. So for
yeah,
timeline's sake, at 14, any skydiving, did that obviously a fear of heights as a child, and then you're, a high level thousands of jump skydiver. That's quite a leap. But obviously
mhm,
there's steps and stages along the way. So when did skydiving, again, we can kind of come back on
yeah,
your timelines a bit, but when
yeah.
did skydiving become actually a thing in your life?
I was 18
Okay.
when I made my first jump. I was already actively heavily into rock climbing. I was a ski racer on a very high level. I did very well in ski racing, And all of these things were, just sort of building me up towards, this greater, not just understanding is a strong word, I'm reaching for understanding. I'll
Mm-hmm.
always be reaching for understanding because I'm learning more every day. We all are, about ourselves. And you got to put yourself out there to learn about yourself. You can't just sit on the couch and learn
Exactly.
it.
I love that. That's I again, people that listen to me regular might be sick of me saying this, but I just love the Zen Buddhist quote. The novice asks the master, "How do I reach enlightenment?" And they say, "Chop wood, carry water."
Yes,
So once I've reached enlightenment, what do I do after that? Chop wood, carry water. So
that's right.
in a way, there's almost no such thing as enlightenment. Yes, there is certainly, but we're on a path to mastery the whole time, and we're going to be off and on the path. But how
Mm,
can we keep chopping wood, carrying water? So no, it sounds like we're going to align with stuff like mindfulness and meditation and the
absolutely.
power of the mind. Powerful, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, well, it's the only game in town.
Hmm.
Everything
Hmm.
else is just the moving of physics, and what drives the physics is the mind, all right, is attention, clarified intention, and attention to what you desire, what you want to create, what you want to experience, and deliberate inattention to all of the pitfalls along the way, all the exit ramps, as it were,
Hmm.
from this highway towards where you want to go. There's
Love it.
lots of them. There's lots of
Mm.
doubt that shows up. There's just an old story within our minds that we didn't even invent, that chips away at our confidence.
Well, these are little threads I want to pull on through the show, and you're already kind of like sparking off a few of my little bits of imagination. But just before we get into those like deeper rooted, maybe like kind of issues is the wrong word, but deeper rooted thoughts and tools for those things as well. I get the feeling adrenaline is a big part of your life. Would I be correct in saying that?
It is.
Yeah. So have you always been seeking of adrenaline, and how does that, work just as a general topic?
I wouldn't say I seek adrenaline. No, no. My
Okay.
experience is that I am interested in things that happen to have adrenaline and therefore have the potential for a more intense, positive emotional experience, right? I mean, a roller coaster is more interesting than a couch because something's happening and there is a perception of risk. So it brings me to attention. So I'm in this present moment. We say that risk is forced enlightenment, momentary enlightenment, where you're completely present. And so that's what I'm attracted to, to be in the tightrope walk, where I have to do things a certain way,
Hmm.
or I'm going to have major consequences. And that brings me to attention. And
Interesting.
that's what I'm
Yeah.
interested in. And the necessary sort of side effect or byproduct is that, yeah, I'm going to have a reaction in my body. And that reaction has to be handled in the right way. And if it isn't, it will undermine me.
Mm.
It'll undermine the foundation of my intentions, and I'll fall apart. So that process of soothing my fear, especially in the context when others might lose their minds, and even their lives, it's just very gratifying for me to do things like that and not feel that so much.
Hmm.
Soften it and stay in the game and stay focused and do my job and
Hmm.
think, what's next? What's next?
Mm.
You know?
I've got a whole bunch of questions on this now. So two little strands I want to pick on there.
Yeah.
The one about again, maybe this is not the right terminology, but the hedonic treadmill, the hedonic adaptation. So yes, you get that the kind of the high, the kind of thing you're chasing. So that's one route. And the second route, I'll mention it now, and we can pick which one we go with, is yes, you feel that satisfaction, that groundedness in the moment when there's a risk involved.
Yeah.
But what happens then in normal life? Like a lot of life is going to be normal for you, isn't it? And then how do you kind of, are you just super bored in that? So
Yeah.
there's two little routes there. I don't know which one you want to start
Yeah.
with, or they're probably
Yeah.
intertwined somewhere.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll go with recency, fresh in my mind. But the idea that I've realized is that many skydivers at the beginning will get that bipolar experience where they're either on top of the world or they're not jumping and bored out of their minds, and almost to the point where they fill the space with additional substandard risk that has no value. You drive fast in your car or something, like it's just dumb. And I've done it too. I've done base jumps on board days, that kind of thing where I just didn't need to. So what I've been working on is reframing my perspective. And so years ago, I moved to the Washington, D.C. area, having lived in Vermont and in Colorado and in Sweden and Norway. And I was bored out of my mind, especially on the ski slopes.
Really? Okay.
They're tiny, there's just these little ski slopes. And I was very snobby. Yeah, I really was. The first few years, I just didn't want to even do it. It just seemed so lame in comparison to being above tree line, off-piste in some amazing place.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, I remember stopping on halfway down, and having a moment. And I realized that I'm only skiing one turn at a time. What's ahead of me and what's behind me is irrelevant. Which mountain I'm on is irrelevant. It's about the experience. And if I can pull in intrinsic value to bump up my perspective on what I'm doing right now, the ground under my feet, so to speak, right now, and really just pay attention anyway, make this just as important as skiing a big mountain in Colorado. And so that's what I try to do when I'm chopping wood and carrying water, when I'm eating, an avocado instead of, chips. When I'm eating, when I'm doing something that is part of my training, part of my development, it has value. It's part of the big picture, part of the big goal.
Well described. I like that. That's because I think that's an important point and again, linked to that first part of the question where the kind of the hedonic treadmill, the adaptation you're constantly seeking those highs, you're going after it again and again, but it sounds like you've calibrated yourself to be grounded, to be present, to take each turn at a time, no matter where you are, so to speak. Would you say that's how you're helping manage the hedonic adaptation?
Yeah, the addiction, I'll call it that,
Yep.
And Ken Kesey said it very well, that we really need to upgrade our addictions into preferences, into seeing everything that we are attracted to as just, sort of something we, on some level, are drawn towards, but some of those things we choose to let go of and just label it as, oh yeah, it's something that I used to really love, but it's not good for me. And so I'm going to release it. I'm going to let it go. And there's a lot of things that fall in that category.
Sure.
Things that we love that are just not beneficial.
And yeah, possibly that's a maturity thing, an experience thing. You kind of tell a kind of a young 20-year-old, yeah, you don't need to chase that Rolex watch or get this kind of a mate. But you know what? They probably need to make the mistake themselves, and then they realize, don't they?
Yep. In time. In time, they figure it. Hopefully, through listening to conversations like this with old farts like us, they can get a sense of where there is, a fork in the road, where there is an opportunity for them to upgrade their perspective, to find value in every moment.
Yep, got it. And I just want to go back a little bit of a step here. Again, you've taken a lot of risk in your life, and I think I read when I did some research on you that one thing in particular might have stood out. Was it when you were paragliding and the paraglide broke or something like that? Could you explain that story? And maybe that's got a bit of a landing or kind of a launching pad into this whole concept of fear that I want to unpack with you.
It is, yeah. Well, I was flying an experimental paraglider. It was quite a while ago. That collapsed. So, a paraglider is basically a parachute that you hike up a mountain, inflate it, and then fly off in the way that you would a hang glider, but you don't have all that complexity. You don't have to build a tent, beforehand. But that also means that it can sort of, deflate or spiral out of control. And that's what happened to me. I was flying on a day that, in retrospect, I never should have been flying. I never should have unpacked my paraglider. I should have just kept it in the bag and enjoyed the view.
Why do you say that? Why was it a day you identified you shouldn't be flying?
It was windy and turbulent.
Okay, fair enough. It wasn't something that, in your mind, but no, it was.
Sometimes it is in my head. Sometimes I have to select, my criterion based on the internal circumstances. But this day I had pretty clear precursors. Okay. When the other paraglider pilots don't have their wings out, you're not being
red flags,
right? You're not being brave by pulling yours out. You're showing everybody that you're, willful and egoic in this moment.
Yeah.
And so I had a collapse about 100 feet off the ground. It spiraled me all the way into the side of the mountain. And I was pretty well broken up. So I spent quite a while in a wheelchair
Hmm.
as a result of all the damage, the repair work they had to do with titanium and all that. And the doctor told me I was never jumping again.
Serious. Wow.
He
Okay.
said, Brian, I don't think you're ever going to walk properly again. And when you get that kind of information as a professional athlete, where I defined myself as that. It's a real game changer, because it was a moment of transition in my life. It only was 5 or 10 seconds where I sat in silence after he said that and kind of stared at the floor. And then something shifted in me where I took a deep breath in and I lifted my eyes and I looked him straight in the eye and I said, I hear what you're saying, Doc. I understand that most of the people you deal with will, sort of accept it, accept the limitations. But I said, Doc, you don't know me.
I love that.
And a year or so later, I guess it was about a year and a half later, I came back and said, Doc, here's a photograph of me in free fall at sunrise. I signed it with a metallic, pen on the glass. And I said, Doc, I just won the X Games.
No ways. Wow. You give me goosebumps. Yeah, man. That's incredible.
And it was not easy. To tell the story that way, it sounds like a flip of the switch, but it wasn't.
I can imagine the processes were unbelievable up
It
to
was
that point.
terrifying. Cold sweats, green in the face, shaking, terrified.
Hmm.
Little by little is how I did it. Lots of
Mm.
meditation, lots of physical training, lots of pushing through pain and acceptance of the fact that my path involves pain. My path involves fear. Instead of saying, well, I want to avoid the pain and the suffering and the fear and the hard work, I made a choice to just step up into that space and just go, kind of put my chin down and do what was necessary. And that included looking my fear straight in the eyes. What am I scared of? Step you isolate. What is it that I'm afraid of very specifically? What does that look like? Let's evolve that, a little bit more than the quick glance and then look away that we usually do around our fears. Isolate and to clarify what I'm scared of, and why. Why does it scare me? And then there has to be an element of mitigation afterwards. Once you've realized all that stuff, what can I do in my body and the physiology with my breathing? Lots to talk about here about breathing. To relax the body so that the messages from the body to the brain in these fearful moments can shift as a result of behavior, right? They say, you smile and you feel different, that sort of thing. It works like that. You tap your knee when you're nervous, when you're taking a test or something. It's going to make you more nervous because of your behavior patterns. And when you choose to mitigate through physical relaxation and emptying of mind, emptying of thoughts, then we can move into this space of improvement. And then we have to recognize why. Why are you pushing through the fear? Why do you want to be so damn uncomfortable? You could just say, well, that was unpleasant. It was scary. And I'm just going to go back to watching Netflix, to being an observer and not challenging myself. I got to have a deeper meaning that's going to help me push forward. So this is motivating. So those 4 categories, those 4 steps, I call it ICMMs: isolate, clarify, mitigate, and motivate. Right? ICMM.
Love that. ICMM. Love it.
Sugar, and sugar's evil.
Yeah. Love it. Wow. What a story.
M&Ms. It's a nice way to remember it. Yeah.
I see M&Ms. Yeah, I like that. I'll, again, in reflection, when I listen back to this, I think I'll kind of tag that one in particular. So many questions have come up. So I'll do the easy one, not easy one. So how old were you at the time when this happened, firstly?
27.
27. So then you got to 28 or roughly 28. Then you won the X Games. Can you just talk about that? Because that for me is quite a little interesting story that we might have touched on.
I think I was 27. I'll have to look back on that exact date, but it was in the 20s.
Around then.
It was a long time ago. I'm 55 now.
Jeez, you don't look it, man. Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
56 in May. Yeah.
Okay. So what so obviously you won the X Games, you said a year later. What is there a certain category you won? What can you just let us know what that was?
Yeah, free flying was my event.
Free flying.
So skydiving has only been part of the X Games in two categories. One is sky surfing, where you jump with a board on your feet. That's just you and a camera guy who's chasing you all around the sky, trying to make you look good. And then free flying, you've got a camera guy that's chasing you around trying to make you look good, but there's two of you and you don't have a board and you're doing really high speed skydiving, head first and feet first, as opposed to belly down. Okay. Instead of 120 miles an hour, you're talking about 170, or in the case of my team, like 175 to 180, because my teammate was like a linebacker. He was literally, football player. And at the time I was about 160 pounds. I had to fly my ass off. But we had a style, and we had a determination, and we trained hard. We trained regularly, and we were very creative in the way that we designed our skydives. So the whole point is to not only demonstrate skills, it's also to make the judges have an emotional response, right? They're watching, whoa, and they lean into their screen. Nice. And you can't believe what they're seeing. And so, yeah, free flying is, it's still a major event, but the X Games dropped it because we're just too damn expensive.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, was it more expensive than others?
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about, big cargo planes with tailgates and
right.
You got to pay the pilots and everything else.
Yeah. Fair enough.
It's not a cheap sport, but for the few years that they had us on ESPN, people loved it.
It sounds incredible.
Fun when you're sitting in a restaurant and you look up at the big screen and there's you.
That's brilliant. I said, everyone buy me. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So a couple more deeper things. Facing your fear head on. I definitely want to explore that, but I'm just going to park that for a sec. You talked about your why. I love that, because that, like, finding your why. Like, why are you doing this? Why are you putting yourself through the ringer again and again? What is your why, and what was the clarity that got you to that point?
I like being the boulder in the middle of the river. I love the feeling of being mentally still and composed and powerful, despite the fact that everything in my reality is pushing me in another direction, that it's trying to, sort of beat me up. Remember, being up in the rigging on the ship when, this tiny little ship way down there, it looks very small when you're way up on the second yard arm and everything's swaying. To be the one that's able to relax the muscles in your body that aren't required in this moment, to relax the breathing to the steady flowing state that's rhythmic and complete, right? Complete exhales, complete inhales, and emptying the mind to just the bare attention of the present moment. I get off on being calm when, everything is pushing me towards freaking out. It's a really fun process that you're never done with. You're still going to get startled. I always say you can strap the Dalai Lama to a train track and he can meditate all he wants to, but when you blow a train horn in the distance, he's going to be sweating.
It's a great analogy. I can almost paint this picture in my head. I really like that. That's cool. So no. But I'm hearing groundedness, stillness, presence, that the mindful moments when chaos is going off all around you. And it sounds like, that's a really, really strong, powerful why. Quick little side note question here. Have you ever done silent meditation retreats? How deep have you gone down the meditation route yourself and investigated that?
Quite deep. Yeah, I've done, month-long silent meditation retreats up in the mountains. I went to graduate school for contemplative psychotherapy, which is it's a program called Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado, founded by a Tibetan Buddhist monk. And so all of the psychology programs are based in a contemplative perspective. And every single day, one of the required quote classes is to go sit on your bum and observe your thoughts, observe your breathing, and be here now, like Ram Dass said. So
That's awesome. Well, the reason I ask, I've got my first one coming up in about 2 weeks' time. So I'm off to a 5-day silent meditation retreat. So can't wait myself.
Great.
I'm
That's
kind of
great.
I love it, but I'm a bit kind of scared, but I like can't wait at the same time. So yeah, I'll report back on my experience when I come back and tell you about it.
Yeah, well, I think it's a perfect thing for anybody to do, to get a little bit deeper into your own mind and to face the fear of uncomfortable silence, because that's the neutral in between all of the gears, right? In life, where we find ourselves provoked in some way and there's thoughts that are leading us away from the path, to be able to put it back in neutral and let that RPM come down, so that we're able to have choices in front of us instead of foregone conclusions of our ego and snap judgments. To be able to rise up out of that and see more possibilities than what first occurred to you. I think you're going to find it has massive value in everything in life.
Oh man, I can't wait again, because yeah, it's the hyper on, always on, kind of trying to fight fires and solve things and move the ball forward the whole time. So just kind of finding that little bit of groundedness and peace. So yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. But listen, we want to dive into a little bit of fear here. And you've talked about facing fear head on, a big, huge, complex topic. Maybe not. You can probably unpack it a little bit with me. I'm always big on tools as well, Brian. So obviously, if there's tools we can talk about, a lot of the athletes I work with, fear debilitates them. Fear debilitates their performance, even the stories in their head of what people are thinking. So, where can we kick off with fear? Where can we launch off fear with, like, facing fear head on, do you think?
Yep. Well, it all begins with breathing, in my experience, to become aware of your breathing. What does your current breathing cycle look like? And even do some experiments ahead of time to see how you can change the way you feel, and therefore the thoughts that naturally occur to you based on that emotional state, by breathing differently. So how does, for instance, a squash player that knows that the person that they're competing against is way over their head, and their mom's here watching, you know what I mean? Where they feel this, this emotional, visceral thing, and they have all this cognitive stuff that's supporting it, and they're seeing in their mind's eye the failure. It's already become clear. How do you breathe when you're in that emotional state? It's high frequency, low amplitude, intermittent breathing, where you can't inhale all the way because the intercostal muscles are squeezing the rib cage. You're just not physically able to expand. And likewise, the exhale usually is not fully efficient. You're not getting rid of all the CO2, and you're locked up into this shallow, quick breathing. So if you were to actually do it ahead of time, and just observe, how do you feel when you breathe like a scared person? And of course, there's higher levels of fear too, where we have spikes of it, right? We have stress, right? Which it has to be fed by cognition. It has to be fed by thought. Otherwise, it extinguishes. There's no.
So what's your sorry, Karen? Sorry, Karen.
My point is simply to sort of observe how you feel when you let yourself breathe like that, and then to do the opposites. Right. Trying different techniques. Box breathing is one of the things that we teach the military guys a lot. One of the things I've done a lot of is working with military guys. And they have the first time I was working with DevGru, they call SEAL Team 6, I started talking about breathing. I couldn't believe how much they already knew.
Interesting. Okay.
Nice. Like, well, wait a minute, I shouldn't be surprised at that. But I thought I was coming into this, as this, contemplative guy. They've never heard any of this stuff before. They just only know machine guns and bombs. No.
They knew it, eh?
Not at all. And to go deeper into this idea of a long, slow, complete exhale and a hold in the exhale for a period of time, and then a long, slow inhale. It still doesn't necessarily address the ever expanding nature of the necessity of your breathing. You need to go bigger up and bigger down, bigger in, bigger out. And so to sort of visualize not a box, because I don't think it's square. The way I observe my own breathing in these moments is to inhale in a sort of a round way in your mind, and then when you get to the top end, possibly releasing a little, and then inhaling a little bit more. So you're spiraling upward.
So those little sips I've heard are quite powerful.
Yes, right. And then gently, slowly releasing as you relax your body, as you become still, as you keep your eyes still. We do that a lot in the airplane before we're, when we're riding up to altitude. You pick a bolt, something in the plane that's not moving, not the back of the nervous guy in front of you. You hold still, and now you're not feeding your brain more novel information.
Love that. Love that.
On the bottom, trying to push it down with each little micro exhale, the sips, as you say, but in reverse. Really make sure that you're letting it go. And what are you letting go? Not just air, right? You're letting go of the negative thought process. You're letting go of the doubts. You're letting go of the voice of the bully when you're a little kid that says you're not good enough, right? All of that, that inner critic, it's got, I'm going to say, cut it away, right? So if your parachute doesn't open, you pull a cutaway handle, that first parachute is gone. And then you open the second parachute. And I think it's an important model to have in our mind as a paradigm, that sometimes everything that you've been thinking for the past 10 minutes or something is really not serving you. Pull the cutaway handle and fill it with awareness of breath, awareness of body, awareness of present moment. And then allow that to be a space in which you deliberately visualize what you do desire, who you want to be, how do you want it to feel. Your sense of power is your, I think that's the opposite of fear in my model. I model a sense of control over it.
So again, really well described, and I'm sure myself included, but the listeners will really get a lot out of that. And what I'm here, I love the cutaway analogy. I'm going to probably kind of steal with pride, by the way. So I'll definitely reference you on that one. I like that. That's a real good one. Because so often the problem is letting go, isn't it? You get so attached to it and so sticky, and the brain is like Velcro for negativity. It's just, it kind of sticks, and it's like, wow, how can we get rid of it? But that cutaway analogy, and actually even visualizing that first parachute kind of floating away in the distance, probably helps a little bit as well, doesn't it? Yeah.
Bye-bye. You weren't helping me. You're the voice of that childhood bully. You're the voice of my doubt. And depersonalizing the negative thought processes. I think that's extremely helpful as well, is the ego, the I self that's separate and helpless. To recognize that I self, that shallow self, is in everybody. It's a voice that we've learned from culture. It's a voice that we've learned from TV and poor examples at home and things like that. And it's not who I am. It's just a thought that happened to be passing through, in between my ears. And I just have to observe it and label it thinking. That's what you do in the meditation, right? You label it thinking and just observe it as it is, and don't make it who you are. Don't own it. It's just something that you were completely infatuated with, like watching a terrifying movie. At some point, you have to say, snap out of it. This isn't how I wanted to feel. I chose content that is leading me away from how I choose to feel. And that's part of the why as well. I want to feel good. I want to feel empowered. I want to feel like this experience that I'm having is starting with me, not out there where I'm volleying back.
Sure. No, I like that. And this might link possibly to the ego. And I'm going to use maybe some examples. A lot of athletes that I deal with, they get more of the fear when they are expected to win. So there's this expectation that they win, and there's a lot of fear of what other people think. So that's kind of like the little route I'd like to take with this next part of fear, the fear of like, oh, where do I sit within my tribe? The group
Mhm.
of people I train with, I've lost to that person that I shouldn't have lost to. Have I gone down there? And all of this external fears and what ifs are going to happen. And is this person going to think of me? So any solution, I know it sounds like breathing is obviously the first gateway to this.
Yep.
It sounds like there's obviously a bit of reframing we need to talk about. How
Yes.
would you help an athlete deal
Yeah.
with that then? So when there's that real fear of losing to someone that they should beat.
Yeah. 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 I understand. Beginning with recognizing in a calmer physiology that these are just ideas, that you don't know what they're thinking. When you say, well, they're all, expecting or whatever it is, they think of me this way or whatever, you don't know what's in their heads. So stop projecting, stop assuming that you know, because usually even the people that you think don't like you probably don't like you, about specific things, but not a general character assessment in most cases. And you're projecting that. You're the one that is making a value judgment about, if I fail, therefore it says that I suck as a human being. Come on, really? You have to bring these thoughts into the light right in front of your mind and face it directly and recognize, first of all, that your perceptions, your conclusions may be far off from what they think.
Mm-hmm.
And the second part of it is to see how the thoughts about what you're what you're perceiving your world sees of you are going to be skewed based on what you choose. They're going to be skewed based on what you allow. And if you keep allowing these negative thought processes, because of where you're focused, you're going to be drawn in that direction. So there is significant danger, not physical danger in this case, but danger to what you're putting in the middle of your mind's eye. Right? We see this a lot with new parachutists and sometimes even more advanced ones. If you're landing in a field that has one tree, just one, it's all wide open green grass, nice and flat, the new person will keep looking at that tree and they'll keep fixating. They're drawn toward the content, even if it's not content that they desire, because we're not so comfortable with the absence of thought. Even though I say to them, aim for the spaces between things. We're not so good at space in Western culture. Emptiness, the silence between the notes is the real music, right? One of those wonderful quotes. To recognize that not only does the mind have a natural attraction to content, be it good or bad, but that focus causes us to steer towards that. We don't even, recognize all the subtle ways in which we're drawing dominance of our opponent over us, for instance, because they can sense our fear. They can smell your fear. They don't know it, right? Literally, the pheromones that you're releasing when you're nervous, you're drawing yourself into the negative experience to confirm, once again, that what you hold in your mind's eye is very quickly going to become your experience. So I think to address that fear directly, you got to know why you're addressing it. Because if you don't, you're going to find yourself in what you're worrying about.
Yeah. I get a very similar little link as don't know if you've again when you first kind of learn how to ride a motorbike and when they first teach you, like when you're looking at the pothole in front of you, you go into the pothole. It's like lift your eyes, look like kind of like long vision in a way. But what you touched on there is a field of interest that I'm going down this rabbit hole. It's called REBT, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy. It's a part of cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's all about disputing irrational beliefs of any human being, an athlete. And the practitioner is meant to kind of hold up a mirror going, is this the real truth? Like if you lose this match or if you don't get that job interview, you know what, like they talk a lot about, I have to win this match and I have to, you don't have to, like, you want to, but there's a big difference between wanting to do something and actually having to do it. Like, look, we have to breathe, don't we? But, we don't have to get that job. And I quite like what you said. And it feels like there's an overlap with that challenging irrational beliefs in our brain. A lot of players or people can't do it themselves, but any thoughts about challenging irrational beliefs? You might have touched on it already, but I think it's
absolutely
worth
that's an extremely important part of this process is to use your discernment to clarify, what's really going on in my mind here, and what's the root of it, right? The root of your feeling of inadequacy, for instance. What's underneath that? And then when you find that one, what's underneath that as well, to sort of, uproot and invalidate the inner critic. You give it enough, sort of different angles, and eventually it just disappears because it wasn't valid in the first place. It was just an old voice. It was an old voice
and quite an interesting one on that I heard from another mental coach in this field. It's basically asking the question why 5 times. Like, get to your, I know you might do that for your kind of goal, but if someone has the thought, you go, okay, so, or they have that irrational belief, why? Okay, and then they give the answer why. And like you said, you're getting under the roots again and again and again. It's quite a powerful way to try get players to do it. But I'm also interested in, again, this might overlap. I think it was John Dewey said, we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on that experience. Yeah. So I think, I love this idea of reflecting with, I'm personally love journaling, and I think it's a real powerful habit, morning, evening, and I'm always encouraging players to do it. Yeah. But mindfulness might come in, and we can touch on that. Yeah. How do we keep giving these people listening and these athletes, or not even athletes, the tools to go to that point themselves? Yes, they can have a team around them and they can, get the right people to ask questions, but sometimes it's got to be introspective, doesn't it? Any further tools? I know breathing is a big one for you, but any other suggestions?
Yeah. Well, one of them is to sit down and journal your doubts on a piece of paper with a pen. You just sit down, and all of your sense of inadequacy, incompetence, weakness, all of that stuff, just get to the root of it and let yourself feel emotional when you're doing it. There's this, with male culture, I've discovered we're only allowed one emotion, and that's anger. That doesn't work, because we have a whole bunch of other brain cells. And so to journal all that stuff and to really get it out and be able to look at it and reread it and go, wow, these are my thoughts. These are my words that I've been speaking to myself silently. And it's not serving me. And then I want you to tear that out of the notebook, everything that you've written, and I want you to burn it, to go through a ritual of really release, but you can't release it until you look at it. In Buddhism, we say there's touch and go with your thoughts, or you can touch it, you actually experience the thought, experience how it makes you feel and all of that stuff. And then you just choose to release it. And then there's go and go, where you just next, and you never examine your mind at all. What's the point of meditation if you don't actually examine your mind? So to recognize the difference between touch and go and go and go, and recognize also that we have a tendency to touch and grab, hang on to, and ruminate, chew the cud of our own negative emotions and negative thoughts, thinking that we're going to think our way out of it. And you're not. You're not going to think your way out of it. You're going to recognize, you're going to accept it. That's the truth of my experience. Yes, those were the thoughts that felt valid based on a logical or emotional process. It was real. And now I'm going to release it, because the only thing that's real within my mind is my bare attention, my empty awareness of self, of body, of breath, of context. That's real. Everything else is just content. It's just what's on the screen. It is not the computer.
It's so funny you give that example of writing down the fears and burning it. I literally did that. Like, I was working with someone in my teens who made me do that. So into a bucket in the back garden, physically burn it. And he used the analogy of, like, actually really see the smoke, like literally the smoke is each one of those little letters and those words. So he kind of brought in a bit of visualization with it. And then, in future, he would just say a simple line, observe the smoke. If I started ruminating, having the doubts, he just said, see the smoke. And it was such a great little anchor. It was like, right, it's really cool, isn't it? I try to use that with some of my players. So for anyone listening, don't become pyrotechnics out in your back garden. Be safe if you're going to do that.
Be safe. Don't burn your house down. This is not an indoor sport.
Exactly.
But to really to complete the process, right? Otherwise, it will continue and it will grow in your mind. Right, all of this stuff it has the potential to grow, just like the positive thoughts. It has the potential to grow, but that the positive thoughts can very easily be cut off from the light by the weeds, by the invasive species in your mind. And how many of your thoughts are invasive species from other people's minds?
That's it.
Chain of pain, the legacy that has gone on thousands of years. It's not new, you know. And so we are starting, I think, as a people, to recognize that some of the assumptions that we have about the truth aren't really true, about human potential. How many push-ups can you do, like
to hold up and interrogate it, and but that links me quite nicely to obviously the power of the mind and how we can really manifest things. Visualizations, they a lot of the studies are saying now the brain can't tell the difference between a vivid visualization and the actual real event. A certain part of the brain knows the body's not doing it, but we're strengthening those neural pathways. So when it comes to fear, facing your fears, confronting fears, where does visualization sit within a toolkit that athletes or anyone can use?
I think it's very helpful. I use it regularly, daily. The process for me when I'm, let's say I'm going to go and do a competition skydive, is to learn the skydive, to do the training part of it so it's clear in my mental model in a flowing way, right? Where time is actually included in my visualization. I don't just blink and see it. I actually take the amount of time that I would to actually do the experience in the meditation. But first, I find it's much more powerful to address my emotional state, to get myself into a calm place and then a joyful place, in that order. You can't skip the first step, right? So, because otherwise it's just go and go. To release thought, to release energy in the body, to soothe and relax. And then once you feel really peaceful, that's the time to bring up the specificity of your visualization. That's the time to get into the mindset that is as visceral as you can be, right? Training only cognitively for a physical activity is proven not to be a complete process. The guys that visualized throwing hoops compared to the ones that practiced hoops, we know that you do better if you actually practice. But the ones that visualized and practiced,
that's the sweet spot, isn't it?
That's the sweet spot, right? So there has to be elements of both. So I do the bigger one before I'm in the event, but at the same time, one of the really profound quote from a great skydiver, a British guy named Pete Allen, good friend of mine. We share a birthday, strangely. I asked him because he works in the wind tunnel a lot, the indoor skydiving.
Yeah.
And they fly and fly. When you're a coach, you work all day. You're literally skydiving all day. When I go to the drop zone, if I do a 15 jump training day, that's a pretty busy day. That's a lot of parachutes to pack and a lot of bananas to eat and water to chug. You're exhausted. But compared to what these, the pros in the tunnel do, I was like, how do you keep your mental focus? How do you keep your edges from getting frayed? And he said, well, I've gotten really good at very short, intense meditations. And it really it opened up my mind in a way that I hadn't thought of it that way. I figured you needed a half an hour to ground yourself.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in between X Games rounds wandering out into the forest, taking off my shoes and oming, but to see it this way, that one breath, one really empowered breath where you're going through this whole process, but in a microcosm to shed, I think it was the chalk, you erase the chalkboard for the teacher, you're being a good kid and go outside and clap the erasers and it's all over. That keeps happening. You got to brush it off in some way. And it doesn't take an hour.
No, and that's a bit that I've been going down that route, the micro meditation route. Yes, you can do your formal practice, the kind of 10, 15, 20 minutes guided stuff, but actually interspersing your day with 10 to 15-second micro meditations, even us talking, just grounding our feet, or just feeling the desk, or if as soon as we have to finish this and do something else before we get up and go, just bring yourself present. And the neuroscience is becoming really interesting because they're starting to see real benefits for that, the neural pathway for, the kind of the mindfulness muscle, inverted commas, you can call it.
Yeah.
And before, people thought, yeah, you need to literally get onto mountaintops and be there for an hour to actually have the benefits. And they're actually finding that not the case now, which for me is really encouraging. I really like that. And something just linked there, I want to pick up on what you said. It sounds like part of your visualization, it's preempted with meditation. So it sounds like there's a bit of a hybrid here, because I probably fell into the trap of separating the two things out. It's like, right, here's your meditation, your calm, that's your practice, and here's your visualization as another practice. But you seem like you overlap them quite nicely.
Yeah.
That's been powerful for you, right?
It has. Well, I mean, part of it, I mean, look at my example, right? I'm in an airplane wearing an experimental parachute, right? I design and build parachutes. It's the other part of my career. I've been doing that for many, many years. I don't know if this thing is going to work. Wow. And half the time the plane is bouncing around and the turbulence on the way up, like, oh, that's not going to help, And I'm going to do a full altitude quick pull and call hop and pop and evaluate this parachute that might not work. Often my great ideas that I scribbled on a napkin in a diner were not so great, but there's only one way to find out. And so I'm combating a really intense physiological reaction in my body. And so I can't even focus my mind well enough to really see that visualization until I soothe the body. So I think it's great that the volume is turned up so much in adventure sports and things like that, or, competitive squash. It's intense, and if you let the emotions stemming from the body's state spin out of control, you're going to be a yard sale, pieces of you laying all over your own mind, and you're going to be disjunct, and the full form of who you are is just not accessible. So for me, the beginning of the centering practice, not just with breath, not just with body, but with my whole mind. I'm just being here in this present moment for long enough that the space starts to become the ground, that my awareness of my world doesn't require content. And in fact, that is my home, is the empty space. And from there, I fill that space with a specific visualization.
Well, I've definitely learned something today, and that's going to kind of form part of my future practice. So thanks for sharing that, Brian. I really enjoyed that. So there's a couple of more little questions I want to take you down some rabbit holes. If I'm honest, Brian, I could probably sit and do another 5 of these episodes with you. This has just been crazy insightful. I want to respect your time and all the value you put in today. So one question that comes up, and again, I think I'm guilty of it. I'm not sure if you are. How do you help someone who struggles to get away from comparing themselves to others and maybe becoming jealous and resentful of others' success as well? Because that's kind of a big problem as well. Maybe there's 2 parts to that question, but any thoughts on that whole, comparison is the thief of joy type idea?
Yeah. Rise up above the battleground. That's the way I look at it. In any given competition, there is this, sort of intense drama, a story, right? But that story isn't real. It's a story that you've imposed on an experience, and it's skewing your perspective, it's skewing your expectations. And we get what we expect because we're getting ready for that, right? We're not getting ready for the alternative, for the best case scenario. And that's what we need to be focusing on. And so when we start going down this road of jealousy, you go, well, where does that come from? Where did I learn jealousy? It's a load of crap that I've learned from other people and from my negative emotions that stem from my lower egoic self. Do I want my ego driving the bus here? Or do I want my higher self to be what's in charge of selecting, discerning which thoughts I'm going to go with? And you got to discern those thoughts based on how they make you feel, right? And jealousy never makes you feel awesome. You're never in the vicinity of passionate, being in love with this moment. When you're on your game and you're just loving it, it's just fun. You're just in a celebration of life. It's not about winning or losing in that moment. It's about the intrinsic value of the flow state. So you take that story out of your mind and just recognize, oh no, that's just the ego. Thank you for sharing. That because the ego isn't who I am. Those are just thoughts that occur to me, and I'm just going to keep releasing them and focusing back on my original intention, which is I enjoy my optimal performance. It's fun. It's fun to lean into an experience that you have expertise in, where the mind goes into this space where time is weird, right? It's like slower and faster, and your awareness opens up to almost an extrasensory perception, and we become superhuman, above normal human capabilities.
It's almost quite transcendent, that the flow in the zone state, almost kind of in between kind of earth and the gods at that point, in a way. So I definitely like exploring that. Again, probably maybe a conversation for another time, because once we get down the flow kind of rabbit hole, we might not come out again. But I'm interested in this one. This might or might not come into your coaching, but perfectionism. Any kind of thoughts on the strengths and weaknesses of perfectionism? Because a lot of people you might work with, a lot of people I know I work with, they want to be the best, and perfectionism can be good, but it also can be a massive barrier along the way also.
Yep. Yeah. Well, what are you comparing it to? I would begin with that. Not just within the context of the other people, right? So I want you to be better than. Well, that's a pretty shallow trip. All you can ever do is try to be better than you were yesterday, right? All we can do is try to show up even more and try even harder. And as well as you did, you did. It is a matter of acceptance. But you're right. If you don't have a really deep desire to try to be as perfect as you can be, but there's no edge of the cliff, where you can fall off and go, oh my God, suddenly my self-esteem is just totally out the window because I missed one shot, because I made one mistake. It's not who I am, it's just what I did. And so I want all the perfectionists in the world to sort of honor their value, the value of their sharp focus on their intention, their high lofty standards. Thank you for caring, thank you for trying hard. And your current performance is not who you are. It's just what you did. It's just a data point on the way. And then that curve on the way to you getting better is going to vary. And that's fine. That's human. That's human nature. But you have to always continue. I say, what makes you a good skydiver? Getting back in the airplane, again and again and again. And what keeps you back in the game is a positive emotional affinity for the intrinsic value of the experience.
Yeah, I love that. I think reminds me of a couple of things. I think I heard it at the end of a great book called Groundedness. And the guy kind of finished the book saying, whatever the path to mastery you are on, the people who are the most well put together out there are continually falling off the path, but their strength is the ability for them to get back on the path without dwelling and kind of ruminating on that path, and knowing that they're never almost going to reach mastery, but they're going to be off and on it several times, hundreds of times, but they're so good at kind of picking themselves back up. And I think that's a real powerful little point there.
Resilience.
And I did have a second one, but resilience, exactly, the ability to bounce back from adversity, which I think is really, really key. And I forgot my second point of perfectionism, but I think we've covered that quite nicely. What about confidence? Confidence, especially in the realm when the results are not showing up. Yes, we talk about people trust in the process and the outcome will take care of itself. I think we both prescribe to that. That's really powerful. But what if it's kind of like long-term, we're talking 6 months, 18 months, these athletes are doing all their processes and for goodness sake, I just need that breakthrough win. How do you keep someone building confidence and trusting in the process when actually the data points really might not be there? Any thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think to get in touch with the sensations, the experience of mastery in other things that you've done in your life, to get into the tone of that, that vibration, or whatever you want to call it, that emotional experience. In other things in your life, maybe you haven't had your breakthrough here, your sufficient number of data points to confirm your inner love, or whatever, your trust in yourself, and a sustainable buoyancy to your confidence. Don't make it content based, don't make it data based, because it's about a visualization of something that isn't here yet. But just because it's only in the etheric space of your mind doesn't mean it's not real.
Mm-hmm.
It's here now. If you can savor the sensation of that, absolute success that you've been working towards, possibly for years, if you can be there now, timeless, spaceless, if you can spend more time in that victory dance moment. I have students, skydiving students, that they crash into the ground and again, and all they ever do after landing is check for injuries. That's all they've ever done. And I was like, well, can you bear with me here? Let's just take a second, put your feet flat on the floor. Maybe I'll make them take their shoes off sometimes, and just be here in this moment silently, picturing you're in final approach, you flare, you land, and it is soft like a feather, and it was easy and graceful. There was no challenge to it. It was just fun. How do you feel right now? Show me your victory dance. I want you to get up and show me your, empowered moment at the end of the Breakfast Club, where the guy goes like this, they freeze frame it. Show me your victory dance. Tap into that emotional experience of that now. And you're drawing a connection between this moment and that. It's really a quantum creation kind of a thing, the spooky action at a distance. Like Einstein said, you're doing much more than thinking about something you desire. You're literally clarifying it in your mind and getting drawn to it, like it's an invisible magnet pulling you towards that. And take time out of it. I'll get there when I get there, but it's about the process, not standing on top of a mountain. It's a process of climbing up a mountain and a process of climbing back down.
Really well put. Wow. Again, I love you brought in so many different aspects. There definitely a groundedness, a visualization aspect. I like going on to the mountain analogy. Ice climbers don't focus on the top of the mountain. If they do, they're going to fall and die. They focus on that one step in the ice every single moment. And, you can probably talk to that. Exactly.
This kick of the foot. Yeah.
Exactly. And I just remembered my other thought on perfectionism, which you almost said. It's something I kind of journal on a lot myself, which I try to get people to think about. Be a craftsman. You're in your workshop, and a craftsman's job is never done. It's like you're satisfied turning up to your workshop, hammering, beating, honing, shaping your craft. But when that day's over, there's an acceptance of the thing you've created. It might not be perfect. It's probably not even close to being perfect, but you're okay with it, and you come back the next day. So I like the workshop craftsman's analogy to mitigate a bit of perfectionism tendencies as well.
Absolutely. Yep.
So listen, Brian, we've discussed some absolutely fantastic topics. We pulled on so many threads. I always like to ask my guests at the end to maybe give a final thought, or if there's something we haven't covered that you think is really important, could be stuff that we've already talked about that you want to reinforce, just so the listeners can go away and go, yes, that's a great little nugget that I'm gonna try or think about for high performance in anything, sport or life.
One of the things that I've experienced, maybe more than others, is the look back. So imagine you're 98 years old and you're on your deathbed. The look back, the reflection on your life, and you'll see there's certain things that have significant meaning, that were important times, and there were certain things that you focused on that were not important at all, right? I wish I didn't even bother to worry about this stuff. And it may not be the same humps and little humps that you have right now as your priority set. So I think it's really important to just flash forward into that moment that I keep getting again and again, where they keep trying to throw a planet at me, and I've got a spiraling out of control parachute again, and I got to fix it, But briefly, in some of these moments, the wingsuit spin on my back over Finland or whatever, with the world's largest wingsuit. You do occasionally have these moments of reflection. You're like, I guess that's that, and I think it's positive. I think it does something very, very helpful to look back on your whole life, your whole career from that exit point, and reprioritize, and that's going to lead you to not worry about the stuff that's not a big deal. That you missed a shot. So everybody misses shots. It's not who you are, it's what you did. You tried your best in that moment. Okay, so that you win some, lose some. But what will you remember? What will be the true value in the long run? How hard did I try? Was I half-assed? Like, well, I'm not going to try fully, because if I try fully and I fail, that's something, right? But if I lose when I'm only half-assed, no big deal. I didn't really pull it full on. If I had, you would have seen something. Try harder, don't give up. All right. And don't let failure be a failure. Failure is just a learning point, right? It's all data. As a parachute scientist, I can tell you I've learned a lot more by the parachutes that malfunctioned and didn't work right than I did by the accidental lucky successes, where things just came together and I didn't even know exactly why. Right? Yeah. It's all value. It's all learning. Don't get your panties in a bunch about these little things that happen when you're young, as in under 80.
I love that. Do you read any Stoicism?
I have
not. Yeah. And the Stoics talk a lot about memento mori, meditate on your death, which is not a doom and gloom exercise, but it's going, if I wasn't here tomorrow, am I doing the thing right now that I'm good with? Yes, sometimes we don't have major choices. There might be people having to run 2 jobs and stuff, but are you in the moment? Are you present? Are you doing the thing now that if this was to get taken away from you tomorrow, are you okay with that? So what you said there in closing very much links to a lot of Stoic philosophy, and I really get quite kind of hit up on that as well.
Right on.
Awesome. Listen, Brian, you've been an absolute treat today. I really appreciate it. Always like to ask my guests, where can people find you, follow you? I know you've written 2 books, maybe more. Like, where can people find your work? And yeah, more. Sorry.
That's all right.
Can you give a few signposts to kind of close up?
Yeah. Well, I wrote a book called Transcending Fear that I wrote it for everybody, not just skydivers. And it's read by all kinds of folks. I'll never forget the back of the room, 30 feet 6, talking to another when he was reading my book at the time. He held it up and the guy's like, he had this like, the guy says to him, I'm not going to use the words that a Navy SEAL would use, but that book is awesome, is what he said.
Oh, wow. Nice.
It's the only book, he said, that I took with me to Afghanistan and Iraq.
Oh, that must have given you goosebumps hearing that.
It still does. It still does.
That's power.
It's why I work so hard to share this perspective. And I'm reminding people of stuff that they already know in most cases, but need to revisit, and think a little bit deeper into, so that they can illuminate the unconscious processes and empower themselves to have a different experience. And a more expanded one. So yeah, Transcending Fear is also a website. It's and we also have Adventure Wisdom is a website, and that's primarily focused on the skydiving stuff, but there's a lot of other things as well. And there's also Big Air Sports with a Z.com, which is parachutes primarily. But it's got other articles in there too. But
nice.
Yeah. So yeah,
social media, any social media shouts or not?
Lots of that. Yeah, well, of course, I'm on Facebook, like most people. I started a TikTok recently and adding more.
Oh, nice. How's the TikTok going?
Oh, it's great. Yeah. People are liking it. I'm always surprised about which ones they like more.
Yeah.
All right, it's all good. Yeah, David talked to my cousin David talked to me. He was like, "You got to do TikTok." I'm like, really? That's just for the young kids, Well,
brilliant.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, there's lots going on, and I'm open to more, so if anybody out there has suggestions about other things that I could or should do to get the message out more, I'm all ears.
Amazing. Thank you for your time today, Brian. Absolute treat. I've thoroughly enjoyed it and learned a whole lot. So, and listen, hopefully we can keep in touch, because it does feel like maybe we could have a follow-up conversation at some time as well.
Do it. Yeah, absolutely. I'm in. All right. Thank you, Jesse. That was great fun. Really good questions. I appreciate it.